Everyone at your D&D table thinks they know how Fae work. They know about cold iron and salt circles and true names. They know about the Seelie and Unseelie courts and that pixies are good and hags are evil. The thing is, they're all right. And they're also all wrong, because Fae isn't just one thing. It's hundreds of different conflicting stories from different cultures and time periods and games and movies and books, which means the moment you introduce Fae into your game, you're fighting an uphill battle against your players' expectations. Plus, all of this sucks if you want your Fae to feel alien and strange and mysterious. So today, we're gonna fix that. If your players think they already know the Fae, I'm gonna show you one way to prove them wrong. Welcome to Monster Week, the annual community event that Pointy Hat and I created to bring together the tabletop creator community around a shared theme. This year, tons of your favorite creators are posting videos about Fae all week long. My video was going to come out on Monday, but I got swept away to a liminal land where questions get only cryptic answers and time passes unpredictably. I of course mean the emergency room where I had a fun little sleepover, but don't worry, I'm fine, and it's here now. To see more fun takes on the Fae, make sure to check out today's video playlist linked in the description. There's a new playlist every day, so by the end, you'll have a whole week of content waiting for you. I am hype for this theme because I've been into fairies basically my entire life. I saw Fern Gully for the first time at my grandma's house and was immediately all in on fairies. And eco-terrorism. I became an extremely fairy-focused reader in middle school and beyond, and have spent many hours learning about fairy folklore from GeoCities websites with Amy Brown artwork on them, and the kinds of books they sell alongside incense burners and dried sage at specialty stores. Since then, I've learned that a lot of the lore I was sold as Irish or Scottish or just Celtic was actually anglicized or misinterpreted or just straight up invented. I've learned that there are different versions of fairies in German folklore and Slavic and English and French, and that if you broaden your definition to include similar kinds of spirits and creatures in cultures across the globe, you can very quickly get in over your head. And that's just folklore. A lot of people learn about fairies from fiction, like A Court of Thorns and Roses, or The Dresden Files, or even A Midsummer Night's Dream, which might all be inspired by real folklore, but are now several levels removed from it. What if fairies but fuckable just tends to have different priorities? Of course, we're not writing romantasy, we're playing Dungeons and Dragons, which is also doing its own thing. D&D pulls from a bunch of different traditions, like redcaps from Scottish folklore and bugbears from English folklore, but it also has blink dogs, which they just made up for Greyhawk and slapped the Fae tag on. What all this means is that whether you're pulling from folklore or fiction or Faerun, every single player is bringing a slightly different version of Fae lore to the D&D table, and all of them think it's correct. Last week, I posted a short announcing Monster Week, and in it, my pixie character Maybelle is causing a little mischief, as Fae are wont to do. Everybody in the comments was certain they knew what I should be doing to control her. If you know her true name, can't
Get
you
out the
control
cold
her?
iron,
Casts magic circle,
invoke
and
laws
or
of
planar
hospitality
binding
at the
over
jar.
her.
It's your house.
Depending on
Cold
how
iron
cool you
nails
are.
on
Just keep
half
using
rice,
it. Go down the
saltine,
aisle.
iron,
She'll use up all
fairies
that's
when
why
you
I'm
don't
bring
bring
out the
salt
emergency
crystals.
salt. That's why I always carry a fly swatter. You guys were full of ideas on how I could get that pixie under my thumb.
Go on, grab a fly swatter. I double blink dog dare ya.
Go away, Maybelle. I'm trying to film a video. But this is exactly the problem. I know these commenters are joking, it's just a skit, but look at how many completely different, very confident beliefs people have about how Fae work. And now imagine every player at your table bringing that same energy. Maybe one of them is like, don't worry, I've got this, we all just need to learn their true names. And someone else is like, no, they can't touch us if we turn our clothes inside out. And meanwhile, you're flipping through your monster manual like, am I missing something? Oh, come on! Just ignore her, she wants the attention. Anyway, now you've got players making plans based on rules you might not even know, or expecting things to work that aren't in your plans, or sharing helpful advice with each other that just doesn't apply to your game. And if you go full yes and incorporate all of those expectations, then congratulations, your players are now experts on the Fae. I don't know about you, but that's the exact opposite of what I want from Fae in my games. The Fae are supposed to feel strange and unknowable and surprising, not like something your players have known intimately since the Winx Club days. But don't worry, I have a solution that is both effective and really fun. To make Fae feel alien, we can make our own that our players don't know yet, and I promise that doesn't have to be as much work as it sounds like. Yeah, creating an entire plane and all of its inhabitants would be a tall order, but I have found a much simpler solution, and it all starts with the courts.
Lawyer up.
Asshole. The Fae may have chaotic energy, but the Feywild itself is not just a random collection of fairies flitting around and causing problems. Fae organize themselves into factions, and the most powerful of those factions are the courts. These courts are not just flavor in the Feywild. They shape how the Fae behave, what they care about, how they interact with mortals, what their environments are like. Even the rules of interacting with them can change depending on which court you're dealing with. D&D's version of the Feywild is a place defined by power structures and the relationships between them. So instead of trying to build your Fey realm from the ground up, my super secret hack that scientists don't want you to know, build it from the top down. I have a new adventure book coming this summer called Trouble on the Fey Train, and I used the classic Seelie and Unseelie courts because I wanted it to be something you could drop into a larger campaign that would mesh with the version of the Feywild that most tables are using. Some of you may remember that I first ran this adventure for D&D in a castle way back in 2023, and I have been working on writing it up for publication ever since. It has been so much harder than I thought it would be, but I learned so much from running it, and I wanted to make sure it was at its best before I put it into print, and it is finally almost ready, and we have beautiful art. But it's a great example of why this works, because even though the whole adventure takes place on an interplanar magic train, the entire arc of the story is built on the foundation of the courts and their relationship to each other. The Seelie court are the creators and operators of the train, and at risk of giving you a spoiler, let's just say the Unseelie court also appears. The conflict between these two courts is the inciting incident for the entire adventure, and the values and aesthetics and principles of those courts are present in every single NPC, of which there are many, of course, because I am a slut for NPCs. In fact, if you want a sneak peek at some NPCs, you can go to ginnyd.com/Feytrain and sign up to be notified when the adventure is available. You'll get some preview stat blocks from the adventure that you can start using right away. Don't worry, I don't need your true name. Your email will suffice. If you start by defining who's in power and how they see the world, everything else will flow from that. The creatures, the characters, the politics, the rules, everything starts with the courts, especially the kinds of adventures that your players are going to get tangled up in.
It's all right, sweetheart. I think we all know who's in power here.
Hey, get off my crown.
What crown?
Oh my god. Are you 5 years old? Anyway, I have been designing some of my own Fey courts recently, for reasons. No reason. Don't worry about it. If it's important, you'll hear about it in 6 to 8 months. As I work on them, I've figured out 4 principles that make for really narratively rich courts. Courts that don't just make your Fey realm feel alive, but that become wellsprings of ideas for everything that happens in and around them. Those of you who have been around here for a while know that large-scale world building isn't really my jam. So I think the fact that I've been having so much fun creating courts should be a good sign of what a shortcut this is. I feel like they've basically built my Fey realm for me, and all I have to do is imagine a bunch of fancy fairies. Which, let's be honest, I'm usually doing anyway. So without further ado, here is the Ginny D official foolproof trademarked DIY Fey court system in 4 easy steps. All rights reserved. First on the list, theme. This is the most important one because everything else is going to build on top of it. When I say theme, I don't just mean an aesthetic or a visual gimmick. I mean a big, rich idea, something you can keep pulling from over and over again. Your court isn't just a costume or a color palette. It has to support your creatures, your magic, your politics, your social rules, your entire Feywild. So if your theme is too narrow, you're gonna start feeling that pretty quickly. The summer and winter courts are a great example of broad, distinct themes. There are so many different things you can associate with those 2 seasons. But if you pick themes that are too narrow, you're gonna have trouble giving them depth and unique features. Like, could you make a court of fruits and a court of vegetables? Sure. I mean, let's be real, every Fey court is the court of fruits. I'm allowed to say that, I'm bisexual. Now, that's not to say you can't make something very specific work. If you really want to make the court of bees and the court of flies, I believe in you. There's probably something you can work with there. But in general, you want to give yourself plenty to work with, which means a broad theme. The Unseelie and Seelie, or summer and winter courts, are built on a duality, and you can definitely do that. Think dreams and nightmares, order and chaos, day and night. There are so many good pairs you can play with. Ignore that particular pair. But you also don't have to have just 2 courts. You could have 3 or 4 or more, however many you want. 3s are very fairy tale, so you could definitely theme your courts around dawn, dusk, and midnight, or past, present, and future, or something like that. I did briefly consider wine, women, and song, which I think would make an incredible Feywild. Or just an incredible Friday night. For this video, to demonstrate the process, I'm going with a pair of 2 courts, root and branch. I know that sounds like the kind of restaurant that offers cocktail pairings, or a gardening YouTube channel, but today it's gonna be a pair of Fey courts. I like a court of roots and a court of branches because it's plants, and plants good. But also, it's not just an aesthetic difference, it's a clear functional one. Despite both being parts of a tree, they look different, they exist in a totally different context, and they do totally different jobs. I also love that a tree needs both of them to survive, which is a great setup for the sort of perpetual balancing act that the Fey courts should be in. In my mind, the Court of Roots are all about history and tradition, and they trade in memories and secrets. They never forget, and they never forgive. Root Fae live underground, of course, because roots, but also there's a lot of tradition around subterranean fairies in European folklore. And then there's the Court of Branches, where they're all about growth and flexibility. They trade in wishes and potential. Branch Fae make their home in the treetops, like the Na'vi, or Ewoks. As an exercise, once you pick your themes, just brainstorm for a few minutes. Jot down any ideas that come to mind about how these fae might behave, what their courts might look like, and what kinds of systems or social norms they might have. If you get stuck during this stage and have trouble coming up with ideas, it's probably a sign that your theme isn't broad enough. Once you have some strong themes in mind, then the next thing you need is conflict. We all know that conflict is the engine behind story.
You're welcome. Without me, this video would be duller and a mimic hiding in a spoon drawer.
Okay, I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but when I say you need conflict, I'm not just saying add some monsters or passive-aggressive pixies. I mean the courts themselves need to be inherently in tension with each other. If everything in your Feywild is aligned and getting along and broadly agrees on how the world works, your players are going to walk in and find that nothing is happening. The Seelie and Unseelie courts already have this in D&D. It's not just good versus evil, although in the D&D canon it is almost that. More like chaotic versus evil. The point is that they have completely different perspectives on the world, and that means different goals and different behavior. You may have noticed that a lot of the themes I was suggesting in the last section were opposites, like day and night or order and chaos. That's because choosing opposing themes makes it much easier to create that tension. If your courts are too similar, then you end up with the Court of Fruits and the Court of Vegetables, and they're both just like extremely invested in the harvest. They're like, we must protect the crops, food is essential. And the other guys are like, yes, we must also protect the crops, we also love food. And suddenly your Feywild is just like a lovely day at the food co-op. When building my courts, I'm thinking not just about what each one is, but how they would clash with each other. For example, the Court of Roots believes that strength comes from stability. You learn from history, you trust the wisdom of your forebears and build on it. They look at the Court of Branches and they see a bunch of Fae wasting energy, chasing every new thing that catches their attention. To them, that kind of constant change is reckless and unsustainable. Like, somebody get those guys some Adderall. Meanwhile, the Court of Branches believes that strength comes from growth. You adapt, you react to what's happening around you. You're always reaching for a bigger, better thing. Rise and grind, bro. They look at the Court of Roots and see a bunch of Fae clinging to the past, refusing to change, even if there's a better way. So now you've got two courts that aren't just different, they fundamentally disagree about how the world works. One believes that history is important, the other believes that evolution is essential, and both of them have a pretty reasonable argument. But only one of them has a podcast, probably. No matter what is going on in this world, every court is going to have a different idea of how it should be handled. Now when your players walk into the Feywild, they're not just meeting a bunch of quirky magical creatures, they're stepping into an ongoing conflict. There are alliances, rivalries, power struggles. Every interaction has context, even if the players haven't uncovered it yet. But just because the courts are in conflict with each other doesn't mean players are safe. I mean, that would be so boring. Which brings us to number 3, danger. One of the things I've always loved about Fae is that despite being beautiful and playful and sometimes even helpful, one thing that they are not is safe.
Flatterer.
I swear to God, Maybelle, if you don't stop interrupting me, I'm gonna grab my Dungeon Master's Guide and you're gonna be flatterer than you've ever been. In D&D's canon, the Unseelie Fae will hunt you down and kill you, but the Seelie Fae aren't your friends either. They abduct mortals for their own entertainment, and while that may be sounding pretty good right about now, considering everything, it also means you might have a lovely time at a Fae celebration and then come home to find that everyone you know and love has been dead for 50 years. This is key, because if one court is clearly the good guys and one court is clearly the bad guys, your players don't really have a meaningful choice to make. I mean, beyond choosing their preferred sword. Which one do you think goes best with this dress? If you want the Fae realms to test their morality and their problem solving, you want players to be writing mental pros and cons lists. And that only works if they know that none of these courts are perfectly aligned with their own interests. For instance, in the Court of Roots, the earth is always listening. Trailing fibers and tap roots are woven into every inch of this place. And what they hear, the Root King hears. So if you were hoping to have a private conversation, you should not do that while standing on the ground, which is inconvenient, because that is generally where most standing tends to happen. Once a Root Fae knows something, they'll never forget it. One misstep will be remembered forever, and wrongs are not easily forgiven. Plus, while entering the Court of Roots is easy, leaving it can be much harder. Roots are all about digging deeper, so if you decide your visit is over, well, you'd better hope they agree. Meanwhile, at the Court of Branches, nothing is stable. Alliances, moods, and priorities are all changing constantly. A Branch Fae who was on your side yesterday isn't guaranteed to still be on your side today. Plus, they're never satisfied with what they have. They're always reaching for more, which means it's especially difficult to form bonds and build plans, because everything that underpins those plans is constantly shifting. Now, no matter which court your players are dealing with, there's risk involved. And more importantly, there isn't a clearly correct answer. There's no court where you can just go, great, these are the good ones, we'll just do whatever they say. It can't be that simple. This is the Feywild, not the Fey-tame. Every choice comes with trade-offs, and your players have to decide what they're willing to work with. And of course, we can't forget an absolute Fey staple, rules. This is the part where things start to get really fun. As we can see from all the people excited about true names and salt wards and cold iron, one of the most interesting and defining traits of Fey is that despite their chaotic nature, there are some very specific rules that they are bound to.
So are you. There's all kinds of stuff that'll get you demonetized. Like if I start saying or mother.
Maybelle, please! The reason rules are so fun for us in games is that once we learn them, we can use them as a weapon. It turns interacting with the Fae into a kind of puzzle. A puzzle where the instructions are missing, and the consequences may or may not include dancing until you literally drop dead. But this is obviously a lot less fun if your players already know the rules. So if you want your Fae to feel strange and unpredictable, you need to give them a whole new set of your own rules for your players to figure out. Of course, you could just give all of your Fae the same rules, but I really like the idea of giving each court their own set of rules to learn and navigate. So maybe in the Court of Roots, they trade not in currency, but in memories and secrets. That makes sense to me because money is fake, but blackmail is forever. This means any exchange is going to cost you something personal. If you want information, you might have to give up your last memory of your mother in order to get it. If you want a powerful artifact, you might have to reveal something about yourself that would make your loved ones hate you. And once you've given that up, it's not just gone, it belongs to the Fae now, to use as they like. And more substantial deals are not just one and done. Sure, they'll send their warriors to help your cause, as long as you promise to return every midwinter for the rest of your life, each time with a new secret you've never told anyone. Deals with Root Fae leave you anchored to the court in some way, with no exit clause. The terms are binding, the duration is infinite, and customer service is not available. Meanwhile, the Court of Branches deals in wishes and potential. Not what you are, but what you could become. In exchange for information, maybe you'll trade away one of your childhood hopes. For a powerful artifact, you'll give up the possibility of one day finding love or learning who your father is. Whatever you trade away, now it'll never happen. And big deals with Branch Fae don't usually have fixed outcomes. Instead, the deal changes depending on how things shake out. So maybe they agree to send their army to fight for you in exchange for the right to your firstborn child's name. But should that army be defeated, the price goes up. Now it's your child's life that you owe. That's what we in the biz call dynamic pricing. The fun part about rules like this is when players can twist them to their own advantage. Convince a Root Fae to take a memory you'd rather lose, or a secret you'd like to see spread, and suddenly they're the ones doing your bidding. If a deal with the Branch Fae depends on a specific outcome, maybe you throw the result. Maybe you convince them to take away a future you don't want. There are only two forms of 100% effective birth control, and trading your future motherhood to a Branch Fae is way more fun than abstinence. This way, when your players are interacting with the Fae, they're not just checking off a list of known weaknesses. They're trying to figure out what the rules are and how they can use them. They can make deals, they can exploit loopholes, they can protect themselves, but they have to earn that understanding first. So I told you that once you have your courts, everything else flows from there. That means your landscapes. Root Fae live underground, so there's probably tunnels and cool doors set into the trunks of huge trees to allow them access to the surface. Branch Fae would have rope ladders and strings of bells and sun catchers hanging from tree limbs, maybe staircases carved or built in spirals around tree trunks. That means aesthetics. Root Fae might wear beautifully tailored, finely kept garments passed down over generations, and Branch Fae might wear flowing, lightweight fabrics in bright colors that fly behind them as they dart through the treetops. But the courts can support a lot more than just how your Feywild looks. They can become your source for NPCs, monster encounters, even full-on adventures and quest hooks. I know that sounds great in practice, but you're probably thinking, Ginny, how does that actually work? To show you, I brought in some help.
You rang?
This is Pointy Hat, co-founder of Monster Week and host of his own D&D channel.
Don't forget Visionary.
Sure. Anyway, I wanted to show you how easy it is to spin these courts into actual game content. NPCs, monsters, adventures, the whole deal. It's so easy, even a hat can do it.
Hey, hang on a second.
Great, let's start with NPCs. What kind of characters do you think players could meet in the Court of Roots?
Okay, easy. You've got an advisor to the Root King who has access to anything that has ever been buried. Objects, secrets, your grandma, lost histories. If it went into the ground, they can find it.
So immediately that's an NPC your players need. They're like, we lost the artifact, and and this person is like, no you didn't, it's under 2 feet of compost behind a bakery.
Yeah, but good luck negotiating with them for that information, because they also know things that have been metaphorically buried, like your darkest secrets and your repressed emotions, or your grandma.
Cool. Terrifying.
Or how about a librarian?
Of course, there has to be a librarian.
Indeed. But this is the Root Archive. Every scrap of information the Court of Roots has ever found or traded for ends up cataloged there. And I mean cataloged. They've got a whole Dewey Decimal System down there. All run by like a little mole guy with bottle cap glasses who can disappear into the stacks and come back with the grocery list you dropped 12 years ago on your way to the market.
See, this is exactly what I mean. The second you decide this court cares about history, you have libraries and librarians, you have a whole information network, and all the characters that would come with it. Now the Court of Roots is a great resource if your players need to find some sort of lost or secret knowledge. Lure them in with the library, and then catch them in a Fey deal.
Okay, your turn. Who's at the Court of Branches?
Well, obviously there's the branch manager.
You've got to be kidding me.
It's funny! I told you, my viewers like puns.
Yeah, I'm sure they like puns the way I like teleporting via dusty closet and making your videos for you.
Wait, I thought you loved collaborating.
Yeah, it's great. Keep going.
Okay, fine, no branch manager. How about a courier? Branch Fae are all about having the latest information and being in the loop, so it would be super important to get regular updates on what's going on. There's a quickling who's always zooming through the treetops with messages and news. I'm picturing her with these long braided pigtails that fly behind her and a satchel full of little scrolls with letters and updates.
Like the living equivalent of having push notifications turned on.
Also, this would be the perfect court for a makeover scene. Imagine a Fae who's basically trying to groom the party for their potential. Like, sure, your future is pretty valuable now, but imagine how much more valuable it would be if you weren't wearing last season's leather armor.
Speaking of makeovers.
Stop.
Aww. How did you do that?
Some of us have a presence that naturally commands respect. We're moving on. What about monsters? What kind of encounters will people be having at these courts?
Plants.
Definitely plants. If you've got an underground Fey court, you've got fungus. Myconids, violet fungus, shriekers, all of that works immediately. Also, vine blights? Congratulations, those are root blights now.
Branch court, same thing. Awakened shrubs, twig blights, needle blights, dryads, tree ants, all that. You can even take something like a shambling mound and just run it through the canopy, like an invasive vine. Reskin oozes as tree sap. Swarm of rats, now it's a swarm of squirrels.
That is similarly threatening.
But this is all the easy stuff. The real test is actual adventures. How do these courts help us build quests and storylines?
Maybe something has been buried that the Court of Roots wants to keep hidden, but the Court of Branches wants to dig up and use. Say, an artifact that can rewrite a single moment of history.
To the Branch Fae, this is the ultimate possibility. Imagine the new growth that could come from altering the past with 20/20 hindsight. But to the Root Fae, it's basically blasphemy. If history can be changed, it loses all its meaning.
And to the players, it's probably invaluable for pretty much any quest. Or maybe deeply dangerous in the hands of the villain. Either way, it's very easy for them to be invested in what happens to it. Now, this has been fun, but I've got places to be. Don't forget, you're in my video on Friday.
Where do you think you're going? I need my payment.
Yeah, you can borrow with a human familiar every other Tuesday for, what did we say, a decade? Sure, just send him back in one piece.
Wait, you paid her off?
Friday, don't forget!
So that's how it works. You don't need to out-research your players, and you don't need to build an entire plane from scratch. Instead, you can focus on the courts and use those as a springboard for anything that comes after. The best part is that this doesn't have to mean replacing existing Fae content. You can still use all the normal Fae monsters and run Fae encounters and adventures from modules. You can choose to keep any of the Fae lore and rules that you like from D&D's lore. But by introducing your own courts and the flavor that comes along with them, you're making your Fae realm feel fresh and unpredictable and exciting, which, from everything I know about the Fae, is basically the whole point. This way, when your players step into the wrong ring of toadstools and end up in the Feywild, they don't get to rely on what they think Fae are like, or what Yates thinks Fae are like, or Sarah J. Maas thinks Fae are like. Instead, they have to pay attention and learn what your Fae are like. Sexy, for one thing. And of course, if you're enjoying all the Fae talk, don't forget that there is plenty more being released to celebrate Monster Week. There are daily playlists of creators sharing their own takes on Fae all week long. Lore, mechanics, homebrew, maybe even more problematic pixies. No? Just me for that one? Great.